I'll be tying a Schroeder's parachute hopper today. This happens to be a size 6 that's in the vise right now, but I'm going to tie one in a size 10 using a Daiichi 1280 hook. I've already crimped the barb. No, I haven't. I'll crimp the barb and put it in the vise. I'm using some Danville 70 denier or 6/0 thread in olive. Start behind the eye of the hook and make touching turns halfway down the shank. Right to there, and then halfway back to spiral up. And that's a perfect place that it's a mark that I use for all my parachute flies on any hook. This is some poly yarn. It's some Fentex, and I'll get out is slipper in Kreft yarn, Fentex. I'll provide a link for it. As you can see, it comes in a big skein. And I will just bind it down on top. And come back and use some thread to create a dam that will keep my parachute post extending straight up. Coming with my scissors, cut it at an angle, and that will help with the taper of the body. I want to create the post, and I found that it's easy just to turn the fly towards me and make touching turns as I go up the shank. And it will easily unwind if you pull it at an angle, just like that. But we will go ahead and post this. And this is just creating a base for when I'm ready to put my hackle on. And I'll go back down. And then around the hook. If there's some fibers that are going to be in your way later, just take care of them now. I'll flatten my thread and just use my touching turns to cover up and create the taper of the body. And I'll quickly go back to the barb. For the ribbing, I'm using something called Life Flex. It's a flexible fiber. And I have one already partially used, so I'll use it again. I'll tie it on with a soft wrap on the far side of the hook. Oops, that's another piece. That was something else on a different fly. We'll use this one. And go ahead and bind it down tightly. And put it in the keeper out of the way. I'm using a Hairtron Olive Tan, and that's the color that I'll be dubbing the body. The body is fairly robust, so I'll be using a lot of dubbing. That's what takes the most time for this fly. And here's a little trick I learned from Kelly Gallup a few months ago. This is just a fly box container that will hold a sponge, and I just use a little bit of water on that sponge, and rather than using the moisture from my mouth that I normally do, this is probably better for me. So I'll start to go ahead and dub this body. The hair tron is a lot of rabbit, and so these fibers are fairly short, so it takes a while to dub this body. And you'll notice that I'm just taking a little bit at a time and putting it around the thread. Squeeze and rotate in one direction. And now I will go ahead and start creating the body. I try to use touching turns as I move forward. And my approach is just to go back and forth until I get the taper I want. I'm going to leave a space about 2 eye lengths behind the parachute post, and that's what I have found is the amount of room I need for the remaining parts of the fly. I'll continue to add dubbing, perhaps a little faster now. As you can tell, I'm just using it in different parts, trying to keep a similar amount on my thread all the way up and down, and use the rotary function and just create a fairly large body, but has a little bit of a taper from the back to the front. And just keep using more dubbing, pull some out, and again I'll just tease some of the dubbing out. Get a little more moisture, and let's see if that will be enough. I'll use a little bit more. And you can make these bodies as large as you want. A grasshopper has a fairly thick body. I think that will do. Now I'll take my stretchy fiber, and I don't want to make it too tight. I'm just going to make it taut as I move up. And go around the shank of the hook one complete time and make several wraps, because this is stretchy material, to make sure it doesn't come undone. One practice I like to do is I've taken 4 or 5 wraps to keep that tied down, then I take one complete wrap around the hook, so if I bump it, it doesn't unwind. Now for the back of the fly, I'll use some turkey, the turkey tail, and I've coated this particular fly. I should talk about this quickly. Traditionally, if you don't treat this turkey with something, it will split apart very easily. And so what I've done is you can use a lot of different products, but I've used something called Softex. I have used some UV resin in the past, or just head cement to coat the turkey fibers, and I've coated this down to about this point and let it dry overnight, and I've come back and cut different pieces. So if you notice up in this section, I've not put any Softex on it, and see how easily these come apart. Versus down here, these are pretty hard. But it is it is malleable, so I can move it and it doesn't split. So I've cut a piece off that looks like this. And this is the piece that was very close to the stem there. And it's a very hard piece. And this is softer up in this section. So I'm going to tie it. I'll make a straight cut here over my wastebasket. And that's the section that I'll tie in. I want to have it extend a little bit past the bend of the hook. And I will come over here and just create a rounded. So I've just started to cut and go at a circular motion to create a round piece. One of the problems I had tying this fly, and I'll see if I can demonstrate it here. I plan to put a little more dubbing right there, but if you notice that if the body's too thin and you try to tie that around the hook, your thread will just slip off of it. So I'll put a little bit more dubbing, and the intent is to create a little bit of a wider tie-in point for this wing. And now hopefully when I'll tie it in directly on top of that, the wide spot that I just put in, I just dubbed. And you notice how much easier that was to attach. I've got some little fibers extending out that you don't need to cut them, but they're bugging me, so I'm going to remove them. Now for the legs, I've used pheasant and created an overhand knot, and I'll show you how I create those at the end of the video. But I'll just go ahead and remove one of these. And these will be the legs. I'll trim that piece. And I find it's easy to move my vise so that I tie these directly on top. And the knot's going to be right at the bend of the hook. So I've got that spot figured out. Hold it with my thumb and make some tight turns, and you can see that leg is sitting on the side of the fly. And now I'll do it for the other side as well. Pull off a piece on the other side. Line them up to where the other leg was. And I'm tying it right on the side. That's about 3 wraps to hold it. And now I'll just make sure that those are aligned where I want them. I can still move them to some extent. And now I'll trim that little piece. I'll hold both of them tightly along the body and make a few more secure wraps. Then come back in and trim the remaining parts of the legs. If you want to make it a little bit more secure, you can add a little bit of Zap-A-Gap. This is the brushable. And I will put a dab on each leg. And just on top of the wing. I'll advance the thread to just in front of the post, and we'll use some grizzly hackle. This happens to be from Collins Hackle Farm, particularly for larger size hackles. I find that I can get size 6 and 4 easily from some of the Collins hackle. I love the Whiting Farms hackle and use it a lot, but in this particular case I've just chosen to use this one today. And here's my hackle. I'll tie it with the shiny side forward. I've prepped it so my tie-in point I've pulled off the barbules so they extend, so I have a bare stem going past the point where I have tied in or used thread to create that post. So I'll just repeat that as I move up the post with touching turns. And now back down. And around the hook. We use some more dubbing to create the thorax and head area. It's the same dubbing I used for the body. And I like to start towards the eye and then move back towards the post, creating somewhat of a taper. Flatten my thread. Continue to add a little more dubbing. This will cover the wing area. It'll go over the wing and around the post as well. So you can tell that it's the same diameter, and I create my taper as I wrap back and forth over the fly. I need just a tiny bit more dubbing. I had a bare spot on my side. Here we go. And you'll note that I have my thread on the back side of the post. I'll take my hackle and pull it down and start at the top and take a turn and then go underneath that turn and go underneath that turn and just keep going down. I'll switch this so I can see a little bit better. And if you continue to go, I'll exaggerate so I come up over the wing, down on the other side, notice how far down I am, and then come here on my side and I'm down, pull it down away, and that will make sure that you're not trapping any fibers down. Now I'll finish it, I'll hold it on this side, and with the reason the thread was on this side of the post is as I tie it off, I will bring it around the post and I'm right at just above the body of the fly, and I'll move my thread back and forth, so I'm trying not to trap any fibers down, and I'm tying off the hackle around the post. I'll trim my hackle. And to tie this off, I'll just put a dab of Zap-A-Gap on the thread. And a friend of mine just winds it, and he said that that's all you need. And let that settle for a few seconds, and that Zap-A-Gap, it should hold that securely. If you don't trust that, you can just take your hackle or your whip finisher and make sure you're not trapping any fibers down. Tighten it, and then cut it off. The last part is I will trim my parachute. And it's about the length of the body, or probably half the length of the body. And then for the legs, I just hold these back and cut it. I don't know the proportion I use. Let's see. It's about 3/4 of the length of the body, but you can make whatever determination you want. If you want to make this a little more secure, I will put a little bit of a Zap-A-Gap on the knots. Here's how I create the legs for the Schroeder's parachute hopper. I have some already prepared. I found it's easy enough just to crimp down the pheasant tail so it'll fit in the vise easily. And I'll take a little tool that I'll provide a link down below. This is a Wasatch tool that I purchased a while ago. So you just select some fibers, and I'll go around and catch those fibers, and the lock goes through and pull. And that just creates an overhand knot. And you can pull that tight. And that's easily how you can create the legs. So here's the tool. And as I said, I'll provide a link for a YouTube video that shows better how to use it. And your fly is done. So that's a Schroeder's parachute hopper. I will link to the fly pattern sheet on my RiverKeeper Fly website. And please like and subscribe to my RiverKeeper Fly YouTube channel. and I'll see you soon.